Okay, I'm going to shoot a little video today of sandblasting some parts and getting them primed and painted. As you can see, I have the toolbox here. That's one part I'm going to do. We got the sway bar or stabilizer bracket, along with some nuts and bolts. And as you can see, the drawbar in the back. There's a drawbar attachment, I guess you could call it, the one that's underneath the belly of the tractor, and the other sway bar, stabilizer bar bracket. I'm gonna try not to talk too much in this because you're not gonna hear me anyway. Plus, as you can hear, the neighbors over here mowing, so it's gonna be in the background as well. But that's what I'm starting with, and I'll zoom in here and get a little better picture over top, and then I'll show you the blasting process and the paint mixing and spraying. There's one little rust hole right there. As long as it doesn't go any bigger, I'm not going to worry with fixing that. I'm just going to leave it be. Just to kind of show you my equipment that I'll be using. I have a 60-gallon Quincy compressor. It's a dual stage compressor. The blaster I have kind of taxes it, and I can actually run it out of air. So it works, but I kind of wished I had a bigger one, or maybe even a receiver tank. But that compressor is blasted to 8N, the 861, and now the 4000, so I can't complain too much. One thing I did add when I did the 4000, which it's hard to see from this angle, but I added an aftercooler behind the compressor, which is basically just a transmission cooler to run the compressed air through, just to cool it off before it goes in the tank. That really helps with my moisture problem, and it kind of keeps the air pressure a little higher, I think. And so if you're going to sandblast, there's some videos on YouTube of how to do that. I actually found a video on YouTube is how to do mine. And so I highly recommend you do that. But that's the compressor. That's my sandblaster. I think it's a 90-pound pressure blaster. And as you can see, I'm running a 3/4 inch air line to it. So this thing really blasts some stuff. I have a couple cabinets I use for some small stuff like nuts and bolts. They work, but that thing there makes short work of them. And I actually purchased that and the compressor both at Northern Tool and Equipment. Alright, so before I get to blasting, I want to talk a little bit about my PPE that I use for this. The main thing you're going to need is going to be a blast hood of some kind. This one actually has a hard hat in it. I really like this one. The second thing you're going to need is going to be a respirator. This is an old paint respirator I got. I put the little foams on it. Obviously this is not good for painting, but it is good for keeping dust down. Now on the respirator, that goes without saying, do not use sand. There's silica in it and can cause bad stuff. You don't want it. I'm actually using a coal slag media that was also purchased from Northern Tool. It's what I use. It's no silica, but just be aware of that. Next, I have a jean jacket just to help protect my arms, because it hurts to get hit with this sand. And then I have some gloves. I have an insulated glove to hold on to the blaster, because that thing does get cold. And then I use just a latex glove on my other hand to keep sand from pelting my hand. Last thing is some earplugs. And yeah, these are dirty as heck, but they work, because that thing will give you a headache listening to, I think got it set on about 100 psi right now, so just imagine 100 psi coming out as a hissing sound for an hour or more. It gives you a headache. So that's what I use. I've done it with wearing shorts as well as long pants. Either one works, but if you get hit with your sand a lot in your legs, they kind of start to hurt after a while. So if you can stand to wear pants, do it, because as you can imagine, this jean jacket in the summertime, it's pretty rough. But I'm gonna move my camera down out of the way now and start to get to blasting. Alright, so now that I'm finished blasting, I just got to clean up all the sand on the ground. This is what the tarp was for. I didn't mention that at the beginning. I get all that scooped up, strained, put back into my blaster because I can reuse this stuff. And I'll get this stuff hit with epoxy primer, and then we'll turn everything blue, with the exception of the bolts. I will plate those. Okay, so I'm getting ready to mix up some epoxy primer. This is just PPG shop line. It's a white epoxy. I'm gonna mix it 2 to 1, and then I'm gonna add a little bit of hardener to it, or not hardener, reducer. There's the hardener. As you see, I got a little cup on the scale. I usually weigh mine out. I figure it's more accurate than actually using the little graduations on the cups. So for those brackets and that drawbar and toolbox, I'm probably going to need around 70 grams or so. And yes, I use grams just because it's easier math. And I'll get about 70 grams of total sprayable paint or primer mixed up, and then I'll go get it primed. Okay, so I'm going to have a little closer to about 100 grams by the time I'm done here, but that should be fine. And I added a little too much hardener. I got the wrong number in my head. So let me just add a little bit more. Primer back to it. And I'm sorry for the shaky videos. It's hard to do without a tripod. And there, I just added about 10 grams of reducer. Now I'll get that all stirred up and get it put into my spray gun. Which my spray gun is an Iwata LPH 400. Very dirty, but clean inside. And as you see, I got everything hung up. The toolbox is off to the side of the screen. I can't get that in the frame. But I got this stuff hanging on old trunk springs. And everything's been wiped down with a wax and grease remover. So now I'm going to get it primed. Okay, now I'll let that sit there and flash off for about 30 minutes. Then I'll go get some blue mixed up and we'll paint it blue. And I'm sure some of you might be wanting to comment, why am I not wearing a respirator? And to be honest, on the primer, I pretty much never wear one. Being open air like this, it doesn't really affect me. However, on the color, the hardener I use has isocyanates in it, which is the stuff that's really bad for you. And I will be wearing a respirator when I spray the color. Okay, so here's my paints that I'm going to be using. That's the New Holland Blue. Got some magic hardener I'm going to put in it. That's 16 parts paint, 1 part hardener. And then I'm going to add some splash of Zylol thinner, and that's going to help it just flow out of the gun a little easier and lay down a little smoother. And once again, measuring it. This time I'm going to have a little bit bigger cup because I'm probably going to need some more paint, because I only got one coat on that stuff with the primer, which is plenty, but I like to put at least 2 coats of paint on everything. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to do 160 grams, milliliters, whatever, same thing, of paint, 10 milliliters of hardener, and about 10 milliliters of thinner. And I don't want to film this one just because it's such a pain in the butt, but it's basically the same thing I just did with the primer. Just add it all up, mix it up, and then stick it back into my paint gun. All right, so there's the stuff painted blue. I'll swing around and get the other side here in a second, so you can see how pretty this color is. Because sitting in a chicken house, it don't do it much justice versus being in the sunlight. I didn't have it thin enough and it was a little difficult to spray. However, everything did get 2 good heavy coats on it. And down inside the toolbox was kind of a pain, which I knew it was going to be anyway. So I'll probably come back with an airbrush or maybe even just a paintbrush and touch it up some. But still pretty decent inside of there. Alright, so next thing I'm going to do here at the end of this video is show you plating those bolts, or a bolt and a pin that go in that little drawbar bracket there. And that'll be the end of it. And that's how I go from rusty parts to nice pretty parts. Alright, so I'm sitting here now with my plating tanks. And this is for zinc plating. Because as I've mentioned multiple times, you know, I've replated parts for this tractor versus buying new. This is a Caswell plating kit. You can do a home kit, but I never had much luck out of them, so I bought this kit. But anyway, what I have is this is the plating tank. As you can see, I have a zinc anode here hooked up to my power supply. And when you plate this stuff, you got to do it by surface area. Well, this is the drawbar pin, and I calculated surface area on it of, I think it was like roughly a little over 6 inches. So I got my power supply set at 0.9 amps, and I'm basically just going to drop it in here and just kind of like swish it around. Which I have a pump, but it just messes everything up. And I'm just going to let it sit there for about 5-10 minutes, and when it comes out, it should be nice and plated. Alright, so there's about 9 minutes in the plate. So now I'm going to take it and dump it into a clear chromate, which is in this bucket right here. You can see what it looks like right now. And there it's in its chromate. So I can tell this pin had some rust on it. It's not very shiny, however it is protected by the plate. And just because I still have stuff laying here, this is fitting for the power steering hose I did the other day. That's the original. Here's hose clamps for the power steering, also originals. So now I'm going to take one of these. I'll take this 3/8 bolt and I'll go ahead and do it next. Then I won't really bore you with the whole steps, but I will show the end process of all this stuff that I did sandblast today. Alright, there's a look at the final pieces.